Hello, everybody. My name is Tiffany. I'm the Tipsy Artist, and we're going live today to teach you how to paint a beautiful Christmas cottage. Now, a little bit about this particular painting. It is inspired by a Hallmark movie that I watched recently. So it was actually called Christmas Cottage. And they had a really fun little quote. So if you stayed there, it was in cross stitch, and it said, I have it in the description. Whoever spends a Christmas night behind these doors will have true love forevermore. So you could have forever love, forever true love if you paint this painting. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And I've got the trace all done. This is a brand new painting for me, so I'm painting it for the first time. And so as soon as I get done, then I will upload the traceable and the painting kit on my website, tipsyartist.com. And I'll leave it in the description so that you can find it and look for that if you want to go ahead and paint this. So we're going to have fun. All right, so with our kit, we always have everything that you need. We select all the paints and the brushes and the canvas. Everything comes with it. And so I've got some stuff ready to go here. I'm going to start with a lot of snow nearby. And then, of course, our cottage is going to be very Christmas inspired with some beautiful deep cool reds and some like green accents. So it's going to be definitely very Christmas inspired. But however, if you want to make this last all year round, then you can certainly easily omit the little wreath and then make your cottage to be a little bit more of like some light whites or some brown, something that's just a little bit more all year round too. So that's certainly an option. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with a nice big brush here. And then also another option is just to use the mama brush comes with the kit. This is certainly big enough. For the sake of time and being able to be fast during a live show, I typically start with a little bit of a bigger brush here. So I'm going to go ahead and use some white. This is titanium white. Let me give you a visual on that. Titanium white and a little bit of some Mars black, just a tiny amount to add a little bit of a gray into the sky. And then we'll also add just a tiny amount of some primary cyan blues. We have just a real subtle hint of that. We're going to keep the sky very, very light, but I do want a little hint of that in the background. So got that nearby here. And then I also have like a little bit of a creamy color happening in one section of the sky too that I want to create. So I will have just a little bit of some primary yellow nearby, and I'll teach you how to mix that up. But that's going to, I'm going to make a really light cream. So we'll have just a hint of that in our sky as well. All right, so starting big here, lots of white, just barely touch into that blue. And let's go ahead and create a really light blue here. Very, very light. So we'll definitely start with that and just sweep that across. I'll make sure I get that shadow out of the way. Let's go down a little bit. And I'm making sure that my canvas is on a flat surface. This way I can play with a lot of water in the mix. I definitely have a light wash happening in the beginning. So having that canvas on a flat surface definitely allows you to add some water to your paint, and you don't have to worry about any water runs. So that's really nice thing to, well, not have to worry about. So if you have it up on an easel, then I would almost recommend just, unless you're a little bit more advanced and can control that, control the flow of that completely, I would recommend going ahead and placing it on a flat surface. I'm going to go ahead and keep pushing in a little bit more of that blue. I'm going to keep it really light. So again, that was just a tiny little touch into that blue, and then I just swept in a lot more white just now too. And also our kits come with a permanent marker so that after you do the traceable, we make that super easy. All you have to do is just absolutely just line out everything that's already done for you. And then that transfer paper underneath the traceable will just transfer the entire image to your canvas. And then what we recommend that you do, if you want to keep it really nice and easy, we recommend that you take the permanent marker that comes in the kit, and then you go ahead and do a hard line around all of those lines, just like we have shown here. That's what it would look like. So that way you can do this light wash right over the top, and you can see how it bleeds right through. And we actually really like that to happen so that you don't lose your trace, and it also saves you a lot of cut-in work. So that cut-in work can be very challenging, and this way it keeps it really fun and easy, and also very, very relaxing, because it's super relaxing to just sweep this back and forth. And I'm not having to do this really tedious, like cut in all around those little shapes. So we're knocking out all that sky with this technique. And I've got a little tiny hair. There, it's gone. All right. And so we'll sweep this all the way across. Now, as we get towards this bottom section, it's a little bit more of like a light gray. So I'm going to add a little bit more water to my brush over here. Barely touch into the black, super tiny amount. We want this gray to be very, very light because it's honestly just going to be some snow. So we don't want it to be very dark at all. Just a tiny hint of that. And again, a little bit more of that water. And again, this is just a light wash right over the bottom here. And we'll take this all the way across. Again, this is mostly white with just that super tiny touch. See how tiny that is? And you can see how dramatic it can become with that white. So we have to even push in a lot more white to keep it that very, very light gray that we're wanting to get. And we'll just take this all the way across. And there's our light wash. And then that provides a really nice foundation for a lot of snow and then our really light sky. Now, I mentioned earlier that we were going to have a little bit of some very light cream happening in our sky. So I'm going to take a lot more white over here to the side, a tiny little touch of that yellow, and then tiny amount of that black. So this starts to make a cream, or almost like a khaki, but it's a lot of white, tiny touch of that primary yellow. Let me give you a visual on that. I think I showed you that earlier, but just in case. And then tiny touch of that black. So now we're seeing just a really light cream color. And I'm going to sweep that through. We have a little haze of that cream kind of sweeping through right here in the middle. And I just apply some pretty firm pressure all the way through. So the brush stroke isn't broken up, and it just extends all the way across. And then I don't actually lift off from the pressure of my brush until I get completely off the canvas. All right, so that's looking really good. All right, so I've got some different, I have a lot of variety happening here that I like. So I've got my blue here in the background, and then my cream, and then my blue again. So it's looking really nice. All right, so I'm washing out my brush and it's shaking everything. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and position in a lot of the heavier white that happens into the painting here, because we have some on the bottom and then also the trees and then a little bit of the roof line. I'm just basically giving this a little bit of a time to set up and dry. It won't take very long. This is a really light wash. Acrylic paint usually sets up and dries in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to let this just set while I work in a little bit more of the white, and then we're going to come back in to the really cute little cottage here in just a little bit. So here we go. We've got our little buddy brush. Little buddy comes in our kit, and this is a 1/4 inch Taklon Gold flat. I love this brush. It's very easy to use. And I'm still going to be working into this really light gray. So just touch into the black just a tiny amount. And then we're going to go ahead and place this into this little line here. So this is a little bit of some snow that's happening on the surface of the cottage. I got really up close and personal on that brush stroke, didn't I? Tap the screen a little bit. Again, light gray. And our whole rooftop here is going to be this really light gray. And I definitely want it to have a little bit of contrast from the sky. So it's a little bit darker. And we have a little bit of some snow on the ledge here. So I'm going to put that on a nice thick coat. And here. And here. And then we've got this little rooftop here that's also covered. And let's see, got a little bit more here. Kind of round this out. And then here. Again, just putting in the snow on the rooftop. And it is mostly white with a tiny touch of the black, just making it a really light gray. And I'm going to go ahead and place some of this down into the little trees here as well. And hello, everybody. We have people. All right, so I may not be able to see everybody, but hello, Cindy and Kathy. I can definitely see those comments. And I always try to go back and write back to everybody after the show. But thank you so much for joining me today. We are going live in several locations today. All right, I'm pushing in that little bit of light gray for the little trees here. And we have a little bit of snow happening here. This is all looking pretty subtle at this point, but we're going to start to make it, as we continue on with the paint, you're going to see outline work that will definitely come in and help it kind of pop out to the front. Just lots of little layers. We're going to have a little snowy bush over here. All right, I'm starting to add in a lot more black. So we're coming in with a darker charcoal now. And I'm going to go ahead and sweep in just a little bit of definition here. And then also, actually, I'm going to do a nice scrape, get a little bit of that excess white off of the surface, and then let's go into more of that black. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a line, start to separate out the cottage roof from the rest of the cottage, because we're going to basically migrate down to a nice, pretty red is what we're going to have. So we're going to start to make those boundaries, basically. And we're just coming in with some dark charcoal. So basically a lot of black, and I'm still using my little buddy brush, and basically just allowing the little, there we go, line edge, nice thin line edge to help separate between the two. Let's see here. So we've got a little line needs to happen there. here. So we're still just kind of touching into that little bit of black right around the edges here. Let's see, and definitely here. All right, of course I can always come back and touch up. I missed something, but that's a pretty good start. Now I'm going to come in with my little bit brush. And by the way, every time I use a brush, I always try to rinse out real quickly, get it cleaned up. If for some reason you don't have a chance to, always make sure you at least put it into your water so that it doesn't harden and dry with the paint, because again, the paint does dry very quickly. All right, so now I've got my little bit brush here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to put in some of our, I think we're pretty dry here. Yeah, it's all dry. So I've got some red loaded up. Let me give you a little quick tutorial on the mix. Your kit will have a cadmium red and a primary magenta. And so you'll mix both of these equal parts, and then that will give you a really pretty cool red. Or if you want to keep it a little bit more to the warmer side, you can certainly just use cadmium red just as it is. And then that's also an option. But I did want to make mine a little bit more cool, so I've got some cool red already mixed up here off to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and place this into these little sections here. Now I have a little bit of some wet black, so I'm getting a nice soft mix in between that. So it's almost pulling it to a little bit of a crimson in there. And I actually really like the way that looks. And if it does dry and I'm going to continue that look, I can just do a little touch of some black right over here to the side. And let's take some more red and let's just make sure and pre-mix that. So see how that takes it to a darker crimson color. And that may be a little bit dark. I'm going to continue adding a little bit more red. And that's, yeah, that's more of what I'm wanting right there. So it just, you know, barely changes it. And I'm going to go ahead and place this into this little section here. And initially, I'm just really trying to make sure I have good coverage into every little section. So you want to hold the brush just more like you would hold a pencil. Just makes it really easy to control and get into those really small little areas. And then once I know that I've got it all covered, then I can tackle any transparencies or brush strokes that are a little too obvious. So what I do is I just make sure that the belly of the brush is loaded up with paint. Then I turn that handle more over to the side and then just kind of lightly paint that on right over the surface. And that gives you a really pretty opaque color on the surface area. Do the same thing here. I'm going to make this a little bit more of a vibrant, true red. It got a little dark initially. So it's definitely going to be a Christmas cottage. And I've got a little bit of some line work. I want to have a little bit of a shadow, so I'm adding a little bit more black in through here, getting more of that darker crimson color in this little section. And a little touch of water too, because I want a nice smooth line on the end of this. And right now what I'm dealing with is just a little bit of peekaboo on the canvas. And so that happens with a little bit of that dry brush. So adding a little bit more water, and then it just flows into every single spot there. So that definitely helps. And again, as long as you have your canvas on a flat surface, you won't have to worry about any water runs. So just lots of patience. And you can see how, as I spread the brush, I'm going to pull this a little closer. So you can see how you're getting, that's that dry brush that's happening. So, of course, it's either another layer of paint or a little tiny touch of water can also help that flow right into the surface. And all I did on that one, I just added some water, and it just helps it flow right into the texture of the canvas. And if it becomes a little bit transparent, of course, you can add a little bit more paint, but then also how you hold the brush is a huge impact on what happens. You just hold that brush more out to the side, and then that really helps as well. It's looking good. So if you are just now, oh, got more people. Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Stacy and Kirsty. Welcome, everybody. I know there's more people out there, but can't see everybody, but hello to everybody. And again, this was inspired by a Hallmark Christmas movie, Christmas Cottage. So the legend had it that if you stayed here in this cottage, you would have love forevermore. So I have the quote in the description already, and I'll leave that there. It was actually a really cute movie. So all Hallmark movies are delightfully cheesy, but we want all that cheesy, beautiful perfection. We just want to see it always work out. And so it definitely everything works out. They fall in love. They get their dream life. So it does not disappoint in that regard. But yeah, so this is an inspired painting. From that movie. I need to finish my sentences. I had it in my brain. It just didn't come out. All right, so now I've got a lot of brush strokes happening here. I'm going to go ahead and smooth those out, feather out those brush strokes by turning that handle more over to the side. Let's get a better finish right over the top. A little bit of some red happening here, peeking through. And then, let's see, a little bit more. I want a little bit of black. Put this little shadow in here. And that's going to be a little bit of snow cover on that, but let's do a little bit more black just right underneath the surface. We'll touch that again with snow here at the end. And then a heavier red for our chimney. Got a little bit too much paint. I need to get that back to a fine point. So I'm going to do a little bit of a twist with my brush here. Oh, thank you, Tracy, and hello. Yeah, this is a really great painting, I think, because, again, if you want to make it all year round, you can, like, leave off the wreath if you want to where it extends into winter beyond the season of Christmas. Or you could also use the line art to just do a completely different feel too for a season. I'm sure I'll be doing another cottage though for spring, so I could almost adapt the line art to make it to where it gives you more of like a spring feel too. And take away that snow. Let's get a little bit of a shadow happening here. Add a little bit more black to that side. Now let's kind of squeeze that out of there. Let's go back in with more red. Let's kind of softly blend that in. So definitely kind of going back and forth between that cool red and then a lot of our crimson that we mix up by adding just a little bit of the black. And then this gets to be a little bit darker. There's more shadow happening here, so a little bit darker here on the side. And I need a little bit more water to help this flow into that surface area. And we've got some little tiny stair steps happening here. Just a little hint, and then let's go a little bit more with that dark, dark black and get this into the door. Let's grab a little bit more water to help that flow into the space. Seeing a little bit of that peekaboo happening with the white. So we're going to get some good coverage with that black. And let's see, so we've got a little bit of a black ledge happening here. And then we've got some shutters happening, so we're going to go ahead and just push those in with some black. And then we'll do a little bit of a highlight of a Christmas green just barely over the top too. I want to make sure I've got all my color in. I think I am good. So my red is looking a little bit translucent over here, so let's go ahead and work in a little bit more color. Come in for that second coat. I'm going to add a little bit of some reflective light here. That was with some primary yellow. I just pushed that right onto the surface and just did a little bit of a drag. Just pushed down and then dragged it down. All right, now we need to mix up a little bit of some beautiful green. So we're going to be using some Viridian green, and I'm getting some shadows. I'm going to, I'm going to text my lovely, beautiful, handsome husband and ask him for his assistance. Please help me with the curtains. Pretty please. And I love you so much. Thank you so much. Exclamation point, and send. Okay. He will come be my knight in shining armor. Okay. All right. So again, we've got some Viridian there. And some bright yellow green. All right. And you know what? Also, why didn't I pull this out earlier? Some cadmium. My gosh, just classic Christmas. All right, some cadmium green. I promise he's going to come help me. We're going to take care of the lights. I promise. All right, so we have some cadmium green. Here he comes. And then here's a little bit of that bright yellow green in case we need to lighten some of that up. And then there's some that needs to be quite a bit more intense with some pine green, the feeling of pine green. Hello, my honey bear. I forgot to close those earlier. Yay!
There you go.
Thanks, honey bear.
Surely.
All right, so now we have all these beautiful greens. Okay, so I've got my little bit brush here, and I'm going to mix up a little bit of some cadmium and some of that Viridian. And you can go all three, but this keeps it a little bit darker, more intense. And then if you want to add a little bit of that bright yellow green, and that lightens it up a little bit, makes for a really pretty bright green, which is going to be, that's going to be nice for like the wreath, I think. So I've got a nice mix there, and I'm going to go ahead and spin it out a little bit, get a nice fine point again. And then let's go ahead and get our little wreath tapped in here. So I've got a lot of that just right on the edge. And just tap, tap, tap in a little circle all the way around. There's our little wreath. And then I'm going to do just a little drag of paint just right over the surface here. It's just a really fun little reference to it. So again, all three colors, Viridian, cadmium, bright yellow, green, and then we're just going to do a little sweep right there in those little areas. A little accent of green. So that was just a nice little curve right there. Just take it all the way across. A little reference. And let's see. All right, I forgot this little window over here. Silly me. So I'm going to come back in with some of that pure red. just a nice ambient glow happening in the windows. So I'm going to come in with just the pure red, and then I'll hit it with a touch of the primary yellow. Just a nice abstracted glow in the window. So see how that works? This is just a little bit of abstraction, but just creates like a soft ambient glow happening inside the house there. All right, now a little bit again, and then let's do our little top of our chimney here. Okay, and all right, so this is looking really good. I'm going to start to do a little bit more of a defining motion here with my little bit brush. And so I'm going to be going back and forth between a little bit of this black and then also a darker charcoal. So I'll have a little bit of white mixed in with the black. Okay, so I've got a little bit of a line happening, but I try to keep it kind of light and a light sketch just right over the top here. So real light little touches. And this is more of like a light shadow that happens. So like a little bit more white with that gray. Let's kind of round that out a little bit. And then I'm coming back in with a little bit more white just to softly blend into it. I'm going to come back in with another brush here, little buddy. Kind of softly tap into that. Okay. And we're going to just softly kind of round this out here too. And then let's work into that with a little bit of white now. More white, kind of tap that into the rooftop. All right, now back into that charcoal, and then we're going to come back in and just do a nice soft line right over the top here. Let's get a little bit of water, soften that up a little bit. Get another dark charcoal line coming just up underneath here. We're going to come back right over the top with a little bit more of that white. Same thing here, get a little bit of a soft blend happening right up next to it. Now that we've got this really pretty snow happening and we see the green accents, to me it's feeling a lot more like a Christmas cottage. All right, and then a little shadow here. Do a little bit of a black line there. Tag that too while we're here. And then more white. We're going to work back into this. And let's go ahead and get this little snow cap here too. We've got a little bit happening here. We're going to work back in more white into this rooftop. And that gray is still a little bit wet, so that makes it nice because we can get a nice soft blend. And then just work right back into it. Let's see, I see something. Let me get this where I can see. Avery is now watching, now trying to draw the cottage, LOL. she's my favorite. Oh, yay, that's so exciting. I can't wait to see it. All right, so more snow. Just doing a little bit of that as a reference. Let me tag this little top here with a little bit more white. A little bit more white there. It's looking good. All right, now I need to define my trees a little bit. And so, because they're looking a little bit lost. So I'm going to come back in with a little bit of some dark gray right around the edges. And then I'll come back over it again with more white. It's like we're just creating a little bit of a shadow here to begin with. And here. So I'm using my little bit brush and just taking little tiny diagonal lines all the way down. Now we're going to come right back over the top and use more white, just pure white, and it will have a soft blend right over the top of that gray. And I'm going to just get my top of my tree here with a little bit more. Again, just come back in with a little bit more white as needed to add more snowfall right over the top. Fill that in. So I'm using a really light hand for this final amount of snowfall to be right there on the surface, and I'm just trying to hold that brush just right over to the side so that it doesn't really blend in completely and just kind of rests flat on the canvas. So I grab a lot of white paint and then just lightly touch the top and just lightly drag it down. So we're leaving a little bit of that shadow peeking through underneath, and then just a lot of fresh white snow right on top. Yeah, it's looking good. And if you feel like you just keep scraping off the paint as you do this, you can always just let it set up and dry a little bit so you're not continually digging into it if you can't quite adjust the pressure of your hand. And just so let it set up and dry a little bit, and then grab that pure white later and then just kind of barely touch in over the top, and you'll get a really beautiful dry brush of white that'll hit right on the surface area, and you'll really love it. I'm going to come back in and touch up like our little bit of bushes nearby here. Just do light little, almost like little smudges of paint. And see, it's coming right back in over the gray, and it just looks like fresh snow. Cool touch there, tiny accent. See, this is getting a chance to set up and dry. And this was more of that gray, so now I'm just kind of pushing in some of that light white right over the top. A little more of an accent. Got one more sweeping motion of this. I can even kind of add a little bit of wiggle as I pull it down. All right, and then a little bit more here. So that's looking really, really pretty. And we'll touch this with a little bit more of that just pure white right over the surface area. And then I'm going to do a really fun textural effect over the bottom. But right now I'm going to get up there to that tree. And we're going to tackle that a little bit too, because we have that beautiful winter tree happening. And so this is when the mama brush is really helpful. So again, this is a 1/2 inch flat brush, and we're going to be going into just pure black And as I look at the brush, you can see it's very thin. Let me back off. There we go. But you can see it's very thin. So I apply firm pressure as I load up the brush. And that firm pressure just, it keeps it loaded, but it also thins it out to that nice fine line. You want to make sure that's maintained. And then that way you'll get these really nice thin lines on your canvas. And this is the longest line edge you have in the kit. So it's definitely the easiest one to use. And this particular brush definitely maintains its firmness very well. This is another reason why I love Taklon, because it's so versatile with like doing really nice thin lines. I'm not a big fan of anything that's made out of, I think, the horsehair, because it's very flimsy. It doesn't hold up. And I'm sure this has something to do with my particular style, but I've never personally found much use for it with my particular style. I just have always loved Taklon brushes. I found them out of budget constraints, since you just, you know, you start off with an art major in college and the materials are always so expensive. And then I discovered, wow, this is a pretty affordable brush, but this works amazingly well. And I've just always loved Taklon brushes. In fact, I use you always get those big bag of brushes, and a lot of times they load you up with a lot of those brushes that are either real stiff nylon that you can't use, or the horsehair. And I just use all those for like gluing projects. That way you can just throw them away when you're done. Or I just donate them to a local school. That's another thing that we've done. So we're making lots of just like little V's or Y's. And the hold on this is really easy. It's just like you'd hold a pencil. And so you can certainly make more than one tree branch happening. I'm doing the outer edges first. And like this one gets to be a little thin up here. So you might want to go to your little buddy brush, because you're still going to get a nice thin line, but you won't interrupt any of the other branches. So little buddy also works really well. But you can do some pretty firm pressure as you're going into the thicker part of the branch, and then as you lift off, you just lift off with a really light hand. And then again, as long as it's really nice and thin on the edge, I mean, it's going to make that really delicate line for you. And then you can come back in and fill this in. And then here's what else is really lovely about little branches, is that you can, as you're going along and making these, if you have a little like bump or something, I think sometimes I like to just come back and even make little tiny bumps. And then I always make the branch a little bit thicker towards the base in the center. And then it gets thinner as you go out. But trees definitely have a lot of imperfections. The branches, I think, look quite a bit more natural and real when they have little bumps on them. Go ahead and place that guy into the water. And I'm using my mama brush again. Again, she is a 1/2 inch golden Taklon flat. She comes with the kit that we have, so you don't have to try to find her, but I'm just getting all of this lovely outline work done first, and then I'll fill it in. And just using pure black. And of course, this much of the line art is done for you with the traceable. And then I have a little bit of freedom to kind of veer off and add more branches as needed. And it's just like making, again, like a little Y or a V. You just want to make sure it's all filled in. And I always start from the center where it grows, and then I taper off. And then just lift off with a really light hand. All right, so you can have more branches if you want. You can bring in, let's just go ahead and do one more. Again, thicker here at the base. This is basically where that branch is coming in the foreground. You just want to barely have any pressure when you lift off at the very end. All right, so we have some lovely little winter trees happening there. And then I'm going to add a little bit of some shadow right in through here to help define some of this little bit of snow happening. This is my little bit brush again. And we're going to do, I want to do a little bit more of this, just barely a little bit of snow happening right through here, little touches. Just right in through there. And then we want a little bit of snow on the branches up here. So I'm going to do just a tiny little amount. So this is my little bit brush. And I'm just adding tiny amounts of little bits of snow right on top. So it's just a light drag. And you want a little bit to come in front and then just slightly drag across. A little bit right there. All right, so that's looking good. Now let's talk about a little bit of pounce effect that we can do too. Now I like to grab an old brush for this. So this one's really had it. I have lots of these. So a little bit of white, a little bit of the black to make that charcoal. And then we're going to go ahead and just kind of pounce this out, get a little bit of texture. And that's getting pretty dark. I'm going to wipe off some of that. And I'm going to go in with some pure white. And sprinkle this around. I have some lettering that's going to come in here, so I'm going to avoid that. Just keep that kind of light, kind of work around it. But and that basically will say, love forevermore. And when I make the traceable, I'll actually have a big one. So if you want to have it like Love Forevermore really big up here, I think that would be pretty too. I made mine a little bit more subtle with the little message in through here. And you can either paint it on, I'm going to teach you how to paint it on, or you can just use your permanent marker, which comes with the kit, and you can go ahead and just wait for all the paint to dry. That's the one trick with the Sharpie, or the permanent marker rather, is that you do not want to touch wet paint. So it will ruin the permanent marker instantly, and that's no fun. So you just always wait for your paint to dry. But I'm just barely tapping here on the surface with just lots of white, getting some texture. Just has a nice textural look. And then here you can see I worked in a little bit more of that charcoal, and now I'm doing a little bit of an overlay of that pure white just right over the top. So that is some really pretty texture there. Okay, and so now let's go ahead and look at doing some lettering. And of course, for beginners, the easiest way is to go ahead and do it with your permanent marker, so it stays very, very thin. But I have a little bit brush nearby, and you definitely want to have a little bit of some water, because that will help thin out that paint, and it helps give you a very thin line. And then you definitely want to also twist into the paint, so it basically twists the head of the brush into a nice fine point. And I also want to make sure I don't have too much excess water, because you also don't want a puddle on your letter. So make sure and keep doing some firm pressure, twist it out. And then I've got my L. Little O. We have a little F here. And this is also on the traceable, so you won't have to worry about your handwriting. You could just follow this. And again, I made it a little bit more subtle. So a lot of times my lettering's really big, but I just wanted this to be kind of a sweet little message down here at the bottom. Very romantic. Love forevermore. All right, because the quote, again, this is inspired from the Hallmark Christmas movie, The Christmas Cottage. And their little quote here was, here it is, "Whoever spends a Christmas night behind these doors will have true love forevermore." So how romantic. All right. So, and then of course you can sign your beautiful masterpiece. I'm going to wait and do mine later because it's got a lot of texture. So I definitely want to wait and do that a little bit later on. But that is it. So I'll go ahead and post this online with our painting kits at tipsyartist.com. But I'm definitely finished now. It is beautiful. This has been so much fun. But thank you so much for joining me today. And I'll come back and answer everybody in the comments too afterwards. But thank you again so very much for being here with me. And y'all have a beautiful rest of the day. We'll see you soon.